Good morning and welcome back to Grace Chapel. This morning's talk is about taking heart. I have and do spend a lot of time with people talking about how to remain open-hearted in the midst of all of the things that happen in life, in the midst of the good and the bad, the difficult and the easy, the sorrowful and the joyful. How do we maintain ourselves, our hearts open to the experiences of life? So this has been a particularly intense week, let's say, of having those kinds of conversations with people who are watching their loved ones die, people who are grieving the loss of loved one, people who are despairing and despondent about the political state of our nation, people who are remembering, sorrowfully remembering the difficult and traumatizing experiences of their young life. So I have several roles in which I receive these stories from people, these experiences. As many of you know, I'm a minister, and I also am a hospice chaplain and a bereavement counselor, and I do some counseling, and I'm a teacher in psychology. So I hear a lot of people's stories. At this point in my career, I can say thousands of stories between teacher, preacher, and counselor, thousands and thousands of stories about people's lives and them trying to come to terms with the difficult things in their lives, the challenging and the painful things, the historical things that have happened that shake their understanding and shake their faith. So I wanted to call this talk Take Heart, because I wanted to talk about that process of how we are human beings in a physical form living in the world, trying to learn how to love, and our spiritual being, which is eternal and knows truth and is wise. And how do we carry both of these at the same time? How do we integrate our spirit into our form? And how do we do the dance of being human and spirit, human and spirit, human and spirit, through our days and our experiences? So that being said, the first thing we have to remember is that the nature of life is that it is dual. It is both good and bad. It is both sorrowful and joyful. It is both difficult and beautiful. And if we know that about life, we know that this Ecclesiastes, there's a time for every season under heaven. You know, that there's peace and there's war, there's love and there's hate, there's goodness and there's badness, there's light and dark, all of those things. And that's true in every tradition. Every tradition talks about this dual nature of life and how do you address it. And one of the pieces of scripture that people use is this too shall pass. This too shall pass, because the nature of life is when something good comes, it's beautiful, you enjoy it, but something not good that you perceive or judge as not good is also going to come. And that's the nature of life, and it's the nature of the lessons of the earth life. So we need to get in the flow of that and remember things are going to happen to us and to those we love as humans, and things will challenge us. They'll challenge us. Death, sickness, accidents, financial difficulties. So many things can be challenging in life. And so many things can be beautiful. So in the Buddhist tradition, I talk about non-attachment. Don't attach yourself to the beauty or to the suffering. The beauty will come. The suffering will come. Don't worry about the suffering that's coming. Don't hang on to and spend all your time hoping something good will happen. Just be present to what's happening and take heart that you have the capacity to address those things. You have the capacity to receive goodness, and you have the capacity to sustain through difficult things. And that is the nature of the life of a human being in the earth. And it's important to first remember that And secondly, practice living that. It's not a trite saying, this too shall pass. It's not trite to say, don't attach yourself or let things go. It's real, but we can't do that superficially. We can't just say, oh, when someone tells us, their loved one is sick or they're grieving the loss of someone, oh, this too shall pass. Well, that's just heartless, right? That's just heartless. What we have to do is say, this is really challenging, because life can be really challenging, with the underlying knowing that this is going to pass also. Time and life will change this, like the seasons change. There's no stopping it. The only way we can stop things is if we hold them. The way we hold them is to dislike something. I have an aversion to death. Well, good luck stopping death. None of us gets out of here alive. We die in all kinds of ways, but we all die. Big truth, right? And in the midst of that big truth is the death of someone you love, which is excruciating, sorrowful, grief-stricken, heartbroken. And so our spirit can know this too shall pass, while our humanity suffers the loss of a loved one. We can remember that even Jesus wept at the loss of his friend Lazarus, even Jesus. So why would we think we wouldn't? Why would we think we wouldn't suffer as well? My music on in the background. So that's one thing. That's the nature of life. The nature of life is sometimes it's going to be good and sometimes it's going to hurt. And when we stop having this fantasy, this Disney fantasy that, or this capitalist fantasy that it's all good and just get more stuff and feel good and feel good and feel good. That's the stuff of addiction. If we think we're supposed to feel good all the time, life is not easy. We don't feel good all the time. That's the way it is. What makes us think that it would be different? I mean, all of history has been that way. And, I like to say I live a charmed life, and I do believe that. I live a charmed life because I have the blessing of noticing all the beauty around me all the time, and that is a consolation for the suffering that I see every day. Now, you may or may not see suffering every day. You may not notice or pay attention or be around people who are suffering. I happen to be around people who are suffering. Of course, everybody's suffering on some level, so we all do experience that. But the day-to-day suffering is part of that flow and that dynamic that just comes and goes and comes and goes. Only when we hold on to it, only when we hate something or grasp after something else do we suffer. We suffer for the loss of something good and for the coming of something that we don't want or that's not good in our mind. If we think that this is the nature of life on earth and there's goodness motivating life on earth, then we can accept that sometimes it's going to be hard and sometimes it's going to be good, and we can sustain through the suffering and enjoy the goodness. There are lots of ways to do that in every tradition, every person. We have to fill up the places that get emptied out. But the emptying is not an error, and it's not a problem, and it's not a curse. It's part of the process as we suffer ourselves or with people that we love or care about, or for the planet. As we suffer in our hearts get bigger, more compassionate, more malleable to this flow of life. This is what happens in life. And then we get a sense of peace, and we just enjoy the heck out of everything in life, because that's all the good stuff. That's the balm, salve for our broken heart that comes when we see suffering or when we experience suffering. So when I say take heart, I mean remember all of the beauty and balm that comes to help us with the difficult things that will come. There's no way to avoid those things coming. There's no way to keep from suffering altogether. This doesn't happen. So maybe we could stop wanting it to happen. Maybe we could stop wanting bad things to stop happening, because they're going to happen. Now, we can pray they don't happen. We can pray for everyone we know and have concern for, and everyone who we think about, every situation we think about. I showed you my prayer wall last time. I had someone here for communion this morning, and we prayed for people we had concern for our government leaders, our world leaders, for individual people that we know are struggling or having difficulty of one form or another. And that is um, an active way of addressing suffering. People think that prayer is, a cop out sometimes, that it doesn't, first of all, maybe it's not effective, but it's also kind of a waste of time because you're not actually doing something. But what do you do for someone who's grieving? You might make them some food. You might spend time with them and hear how they're doing. You might just be with them. It's a beautiful, active way of approaching someone's suffering. But we have access to so many divine graces and so much divine intervention that it's a soothing, numinous experience to pray for someone and feel the presence of peace, the presence of the greater spiritual wisdom of the universe that helps us to take heart. Take heart. I hear your prayer. I hear your prayer. I'm responding to your prayer. And when we do that, we're working with the forces of the divine to overcome suffering. That's what our instrument is here to do, to love and to help overcome suffering. So if we take heart in that, then we say, even when I see suffering and I don't know what I can do personally, physically, or financially to help, I can always pray. And then, pray with your feet, pray with your dollars, pray with your actions, but also with your heart. With your heart, pray. The more we use our heart to desire goodness, the more goodness flows. And it doesn't mean that challenges and sorrows won't come, but the more goodness flows, the more we can accept the challenges and the hardships. And then we live in this way of experiencing the coming and going of life while still keeping our heart open to love. And without getting bitter, without isolating and staying away from everything, not being part of life. And people do that. People put up barriers and step back and say, every man for themselves, right? But the reality is that's not how things work in our world. We are connected to one another and to nature and to the universe. There is no every man for themselves. There's only all of us or none of us. So until it's all of us, being peaceful, taking heart, loving in the face of challenge and in the face of suffering, then this duality will be the experience of Earth until we all learn those lessons. There's a saying that suffering is the touchstone of spirituality, which means it makes us contemplate our spiritual nature. Suffering does. How will we address this thing that's happened? People say it's not what happens to you; it's how you deal with it, or something like that. And that is true, even though that can be trite and dismissive of people's real experience. What I think we often do is try to bypass the actual human experience of suffering and try to placate ourselves with some platitude about how everything's going to be okay. Well, yeah, everything's going to be okay, but while it's happening, it hurts, it sucks, it's hard. We wouldn't wish it upon anybody, and we wish it wasn't happening. And that's okay. That's okay. And while it's happening, as much as we can say, this too is part of life, this too shall pass, and I don't have to stay in the suffering. Sometimes when we hold on to suffering, it embeds itself in our being and we become sick, or we become despairing or depressed if we won't let it go. And let go of that so that we can receive the other side of things and be healed and have that salve that convalesces us and sustains us through the challenges. We can't hold on over here to the things that are good, because they're going to change too. I loved when my kids were toddlers, but now they're all taller than me. And if I only love that part of their life, then how would I enjoy this part? Which can be more challenging. Well, I don't know, 2-year-old, teenager, I don't know. Both very interesting times to be a parent. So when we feel like every challenge is a tragedy or a trauma, then we're setting ourselves up for traumatizing ourselves and feeling at the mercy of life, instead of just saying, this is the stuff of life. I'll get through it. Take heart, take heart, get through it with whatever tools you have. People use nature, people use prayer. And it's not the tool that is the thing. The thing is something that reconnects you with that greater spiritual truth of it's going to be okay. How do we know it's going to be okay? I don't know, because it always has. Is death the worst thing that can happen to you? No. And is riches and fame the best thing that can happen to you? No, it's not. What happens in your life is your journey, and you can receive it for what it is without comparing it to someone else, and doing the best you can to accept that what's in front of me, I'll have the capacity, or I'll learn to have the capacity to deal with it. Sometimes we have trauma as young children, and when we don't have the cognitive or spiritual capacity to address it, and it lands in us sometimes subconsciously, and can cause a lot of difficulty throughout our life. And then eventually we start to see what happened, understand it a little bit, and then we move toward healing by looking at it and understanding the suffering, acknowledging, witnessing our own story, and releasing it to make space for something new. With some work, and it is work, we look at what happened to us, we accept and acknowledge that it did happen. We do our best to forgive and let go of it, or at least turn the person over, release ourselves from that experience, so that we can go on to healing and to the rest of the story of our life, and not be stuck in that part of it. And that is a process of transformation, both in our human existence and our spirituality, to say, I'm going to live in such a way that I will address and let go of the things that happened. Otherwise, we'll get stuck there. We'll be angry, bitter, isolated, probably lonely. And that will be another kind of lesson, I guess, right? It's a choice that we have. It involves more suffering, I notice. When I see people do that, it involves more suffering. Because if we are courageous enough to take heart and open our heart to other people and to life, we will see that life is constantly sending us the good and the beautiful to balance out the difficult and the challenging and sorrowful. So take heart in the midst of all of the challenges of life, that the beauty of life will balance that, if you're watching. Sometimes I leave patients' homes and just look up at the sky and breathe in the color and receive the peace of that experience. And that brings a lot of solace to my heart, to say this too is part of our experience, this suffering. And beautiful things can come from suffering that we might not expect or imagine. Suffering is not for nothing. It is purposeful. Like labor is purposeful, suffering so that you can have a child. The beauty of the child comes after this very difficult labor. So taking heart requires that we have that we're in tune in some way to the deeper truths of life. And however you do that, to remind yourself of those deeper truths, hang out with people who know that to be true. Hang out with them. Find out how they do it. Do something fun together, to relax the seriousness. There's a lot of seriousness in life, and there should be. It's okay, but you got to balance it. Let's have a little fun. Let's do something that celebrates the beauty of life too. And there's so many ways to do that. And I've talked about those in other Grace talks about nature and art and song and prayer and all the things we can do to lift our spirits. And then we carry that, carry the cross, carry the burden, suffer, because it's the nature of life, not because God hates us or, life sucks and then you die. People say that. So you know, life is challenging. It is challenging and it's beautiful. And if we can relax into that, we can take heart in the midst of challenging things. Take a deep breath and say, we'll get through this. And when we do, there will be goodness also. So take heart, my friends. Let yourself relax into the flow of life, the challenging and the beautiful. Let yourself relax into that so that you don't expect it to all be rosy. You know, not so that you're hardened and bitter and you know, skeptical or whatever, but so that you can just go with the flow of it and not be um, waylaid by the suffering. Um, Life is beautiful even with the suffering, and it's also damn hard sometimes. But I hope that you will take heart. I hope that you'll find a way to take heart and tune into your spirit, which knows the greater truth that this too shall pass. And there is goodness. And you can find it if you look for it, if you turn your eyes toward it. Um, you know, there's a flower, we call it a sunflower. And in Spanish, it's a girasol, which means turns toward the sun. Turn toward the sun. So if we do that, we turn toward the sun, the physical sun, the spiritual sun, the light of creation, God, whatever you call it, if we turn toward that greater truth, then we can blossom. And in the shadows, things are still happening. There are bugs creeping underground. There are things happening. But if we turn toward the sun, we can remember and we can thrive in spite of and in the presence of the more challenging things. And then that sunflower turns into bird seed, and it feeds a lot of birds, right? So good things can come from it, even though there's suffering. You know, the Buddhist tradition, Thich Nhat Hanh says, no mud, no lotus. You don't have the mud, slimy stuff at the bottom of the pool for those lotus flowers to bloom. No beautiful lotus flower. So let's take heart that both of those things are part of our experience and our existence, and that together we can make it through that. We can celebrate together, and we can carry one another's burdens with each other together, sharing and carrying and supporting one another. And you know, if we do that in our own little part of the world, and we spread that energy through our example, then others can feel free to do that and learn to do that, and then you know, we'll have a better existence, a more connected existence, which will make this flow of life easier to do. So find your people, find your tribe of like-minded people that help you remember and support you through the tough times and celebrate with you in the good times. And if people are bitter and sad, pray for them and bless them, and get around some folks who can help you keep your heart open. Well, that's my take heart message for today. This will be the last constant contact I'm sending because I'm trying to simplify some things, but I'll do some more talks and put them on my Facebook page, which is Pure Life Meditation Center. And, you know, I might put them up on YouTube as well. But I've enjoyed this 6 months of chatting with you, and I hope that it's been beneficial to you. You can reach me through Facebook or through my website, maryfrancesdrake.com, and I'm happy to chat with you sometime if you feel the need. So blessings and peace to you all. Enjoy your day.